back to World Crisis Radio. Now, we're taping our broadcast here on Friday, October 23rd for the weekly briefing here. And Dow has taken a turn south, down 130 points, 1.3%, crashing back down through 10,000. The jitters are certainly there, some jitters in Asia this week as well. Has to do with the dollar. You've got this dollar-Dow trade-off going. The idea is the dollar crashes down. That means that program traders from abroad, from Europe, Japan, and so forth, can come in and snap up some U.S. stocks at depressed prices. Don't look at the market price. Look at the market price deflated by the dollar value, because if the dollar goes down, that cuts into what this is really worth on a world scale, and that has been going poorly lately. So the dollar weakness, it adds up to oil approaching $82 a barrel at various times this week. Oil up more than 10% in the last 7 or 8 days or so. That's quite a spike. Gold remains up at the 1050, 1060 level. Dollar very weak. And here's the problem. All these talking heads on the financial networks are telling you that the dollar weakness doesn't matter, don't worry about it, who cares? Problem is that as the dollar goes down, that does help to drive the price of oil up. That drives gasoline up, and that means that the U.S. consumer, and we're always told that's two-thirds of this very sick economy. Any economy where consumer spending is two-thirds is already quite sick. Capital goods should be much bigger in a healthy economy. But since this is what we have, if you've got two-thirds of the economy based on consumer spending and the price of gasoline is now headed up, 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 this will cut into disposable consumer income. And that means more credit card defaults, more home foreclosures, more problems of that sort, pulling down the banking system. So you get the idea. These things are interconnected. The dollar weakness tends to undermine the entire thing. Now, the situation, therefore, resembles a tremendous buildup of snow on the side of a mountain. The potential for an avalanche is there. A firecracker, a gunshot, a loud scream perhaps could set it off. So who's going to provide that? Anybody could, but look at somebody like George Soros and his British allies. We remind you of the very interesting article by Vlad Grinkovich, RIA Novosti, 10 days ago, pointing to the Robert Fisk article in The Independent and wondering if that was a plant by George Soros and his speculator friends to get a downward pop in the dollar and make some short-term speculative profits. That, of course, is Soros's modus operandi. 1992, 33% devaluation of the pound caused by Soros leading the pack of hedge fund hyenas, and Soros essentially robbed every man, woman, and child in the British Isles of a 20-pound note. So that's what he does. Robert Fisk, in the orbit of British intelligence, the old MICAS in Beirut, right, the Middle East Center for Arab Studies, British intelligence branch of the British Arab Bureau there in Beirut. George Soros calling the shots. You get the picture. So look for the British to be the vandals. Look for them to attempt to precipitate the crisis. That's what they did in 1931 when the pound defaulted on gold, September 1931, destroyed the existing monetary system. Same thing in 1971, 40 years later. British demand $3 billion of the U.S. in gold, and that pushes Nixon into the incalculable folly of abolishing Bretton Woods. You can read about these things in Surviving the Cataclysm, your guide to the worst financial crisis in human history. And then 2008, the Lehman Brothers panic. Remember, it was Barclays Bank that posed as a buyer of Lehman during that Lehman Brothers weekend in the middle of September of last year, until at the very last moment when there was no time left to find an alternative solution and Tokyo was about to open, the British regulator, somebody who had never been heard of by anybody, came out of the woodwork and said, no, you can't by Lehman Brothers, so that meant that Lehman Brothers was pitched into bankruptcy instead of being bailed out in the way that J.P. Morgan Chase had bailed out Bear Stearns back in March. So perfide Albion, always on the march. And notice that when that Robert Fisk article came out, you had all sorts of people, Al Jazeera, heavy with British intelligence, and Drudge going crazy, and some other unfortunate commentators were sucked into cheerleading for what was in effect a ploy by, most likely a ploy by hedge fund operators, hedge fund hyenas, acting in synergy with Soros or somebody like Soros. So the dollar crisis continues. Now people say, "Oh, there's deflation." I don't see how you can seriously believe there's deflation in the U.S. The official estimates are between 1% and 5% deflation in the U.S. in the past year. Most of this has to do with the falling price of oil and therefore gasoline. That has turned around in the meantime. But remember, the market basket used for the consumer price index at the Labor Department is a fake because it doesn't represent what you need to buy in order to live. Doesn't have insurance, doesn't have medical care, doesn't have college expenses that people can be paying in any age bracket if they have young children, grandchildren, whatever it is. So it's a fraud. And the idea that there shouldn't be a cost of living escalator in Social Security, the reactionaries are now coming out and ranting against Obama. Obama wants to give a miserable $250 to senior citizens on Social Security, and George Will says, "Oh no, this is the end all. This is just horrible. This is communism." Of course, in reality, $250 gets you nowhere. And the point is, it's not the case that there's been deflation. The cost of living has continued to go up, up, up. It's just that since Michael Boskin and some other fakers in the Bush the Elder administration fixed the Social Security index, this has been incapable, even less capable of reflecting real economic changes than it had been before. We also have the big controversy about bonuses. Oh, yes. The zombie banks and some other corporations that have been bailed out by the federal government. We now have the pay czar coming out, Kenneth R. Feinberg, the pay czar, saying that they've got to cut their golden parachutes and their bloated bonuses by 90%. Okay, so you've got Limbaugh on the air, right? Limbaugh, always eager to defend oligarchical privilege, is out there screaming bloody murder, that you can't do that, and the privileges of these finance oligarchs are sacrosanct. And, of course, if they get a finance oligarch, they may come after you. Well, we're told that these are contracts, that contracts are inviolable. Hey, wait a minute. The UAW had contracts with General Motors and with Chrysler. What happened to those contracts? They were torn up. Now, naturally, the UAW participated, unfortunately, in this wretched process of allowing these things to be torn up. But still, labor contracts with hundreds of thousands of blue-collar workers are worth nothing. But labor contracts with finance oligarchs in Wall Street are, of course, sacrosanct. Here's the problem. If you look at the list of companies, these are now only certain banks and large firms that still have money from the TARP, from the bailout. So who's on the list? 7 companies. Citigroup, Pandit the Bandit, of course. Good that they're on there. Bank of America, Lewis, the oligarchical spokesman in some ways. But then we go to General Motors, Chrysler, General Motors Acceptance Corporation, Chrysler Financial, and American International Group, AIG. Now, AIG deserves to be on there more than anybody else. They have cost the U.S. taxpayer almost $200 billion because of that $3 trillion of derivatives at their London hedge fund. But the problem is, where's Goldman Sachs? Where's J.P. Morgan? Where's Wells Fargo? Where's Bank of New York Mellon? We want all of them. Morgan Stanley, get them on the list. Cut their bonuses, too. This is a half measure. It's a fig leaf. Back in a minute.